Welcome to the Day One panel.
I want to move right into our first panel, Day One. We're going to start right at the beginning with 24. And I have enlisted a guy that I'm not sure if I recruited him into 24. He recruited me into 24. Somehow we made it work. And he is on with us. Gavin Michael Booth. Take it away, Gavin.
Nice to meet everybody. Yes, Ryan did lend me the DVDs of season 1 and said, you have to watch this. I had to call in sick to work the next day because I stayed up all night and binged the whole damn thing. And then was a loyal fan from then on. And to the point that I work as a filmmaker and most recently made a real-time split-screen movie. So to say that 24 was not an influence on that would be a complete lie. But awesome. So Day One, this is where it all started, where all the fandom comes from for everybody who's here today. This is just awesome to have everybody together. I was listening to the Nikita panel earlier and just hearing that transition of how some of the same team moved over to work on 24 is amazing. But just kind of want to go through one by one for everybody and talk about just a couple specific questions for people and then do some group questions. So if that's cool with everybody. Start with you, Stephen. Also, I have some Fangoria magazines. I grew up reading about your work in the horror space and genre films. So it's very, very nice to meet you. Why split screen? That's the first question for you.
Gosh, I just want to say hello to Sarah and Alicia and Leslie and everyone.
Of course.
Yeah. That's funny.
Oh my God.
Recognize me. I've got the old white bearded Santa.
Wow, Santa. Oh my God, look at you guys.
How do you not age, Steven?
Leslie's here.
I have lots of apps on here right now, so it's all good. Just not really what I look like. Where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, you are?
Leslie. Hi, Leslie.
Hi,
Leslie.
Hi, guys. This is the ultimate split screen. This is like perfect.
But go on and answer your question about it, Stephen.
Okay, so yeah, I had actually just written a film in split screens because I was a big fan of the 1970s split screens, films like Thomas Crown Affair and Boston Strangler, these great cool 70s movies, and when I was invited to talk about this, I just thought it suited the real-time thing, so you could see 2 or 3 things happening at once, and I thought it would increase the suspense. And the other producers gave me a chance to try it out, and some people liked it and some people didn't. But I'm glad it ended up. It's really a sort of plagiarism. I just used it because I wanted to use it, and it hadn't been done for a while. And I thought people were looking at their computers 20 years ago and looking at all these different panels, and I just thought it'd be something contemporary, and I just wanted to try it out. So, and the clock and all the ticking clocks and all the things, I thought, who thought this might work? That's a crazy idea, isn't it?
And it worked great. It was such an interesting way to view a show and sort of know the location or what was going on with other characters, to sort of tell those 2 stories at the same time, and in that real-time format, keep you familiar with where all the pieces of the puzzle were coming together.
And also, I think, a lot of people on these phone calls and different stuff, they were lying, so they were pretending to be somewhere where they weren't, or you could see from their acting that they were not really believing what they were saying. So that was really useful too. So, because it was a very, all the espionage stuff, it helped out, I think, too. Yeah.
When you signed on, Stephen, were you signed on originally to do the pilot and then carry through, or did you always know that you were going to come in and essentially do half of the 24-hour day, do 12 episodes?
I was signed on to do just the pilot, and no one had very high hopes for this thing. Fox didn't think it was that cool or interesting. We had 8 or 9 days to shoot the pilot. It wasn't like they were throwing money at us. I think everyone thought it was a bit daft, but once I got the chance, once I was allowed to make the pilot like that, and it turned out so well, then I hadn't done TV before, actually, so it was exciting to try and do a TV series. Yeah.
Awesome. Elisha, where would we be if Kim hadn't snuck out that window that night? None of us would be here today. None of this would have happened, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I should have always looked at it that way. I always just felt like a big pain in the ass.
It would have botched all sorts of international terrorism plans if you just stayed home and put on a movie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
Exactly.
something in the interwebs that I found, and you can confirm if this is true. Is it true that 24 was the 24th script that you had read or were looking at or considering?
Oh, it was the 24th audition I had
24th audition
in California, because I had been working as a sort of a child actress in Canada for many years, believe it or not, because I had started at 11 years old.
Popular Mechanics for Kids. I'm a Canadian, very
Yeah,
aware.
yeah, and yeah, and so I had basically one shot. My parents gave me one shot to get out to LA and try to make something happen. Otherwise, I was coming back and going to school, going to university, college. So I was like, I gotta do something. I gotta make this work. So I got to California, and I had gone on, I felt like a million auditions. And finally, when 24 came around, again, I had kind of gone through audition after audition after audition. And back then, I mean, you just kind of climbed the ranks until you got to that final sort of screen test with you and another actress. And I thought, oh, here we go. I'm not going to, again, I've gotten this far, but it's not going to happen. And then I was driving home, and they called me and said, turn around, because we need to get you in a wardrobe fitting right away, because you got the part. And I remember thinking, gosh, how many auditions did it take to get my first real gig? And so I had kept all the scripts on my coffee table at this like rented apartment I was, just kind of staying at temporarily. And I counted through all the scripts, and it was 24 scripts. So I was like, wow, that's not too bad actually. But that wasn't including auditions for films and stuff like that. But for TV pilots, that was the 24th one. So it was kind of weird that it worked out that way. Strange.
Is that your magic number then? Has that come up anywhere else in life? 24?
No, not necessarily, but yeah, but that year, yeah, 24 was definitely my number for sure. And it's funny, Steven saying that he said, I don't remember, because I was so young, that the studio didn't really put all that much, thought or love into it at the time, because obviously I wasn't on that side of things. But I do remember when the pilot came out, that leading up to it, there was like billboards. I was, you watched the World Series that year, and like behind the catcher, there was like the billboard 24. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, ooh, this I think is going to be big. Like, this is sort of a big deal. Like, I was like, I'd never been on something where, you were driving around LA and there was these huge billboards of 24, and there was a real big push anyway at that time. But obviously probably they had seen the pilot and seen what we were doing and maybe change their tone a little bit. But yeah, I remember being very excited and kind of in shock about that.
It's wild to hear these thoughts that the network maybe didn't think the show was what was going to have the popularity that it had.
But the script was really complicated. I mean, even for me, when I remember just being so thankful that, oh my God, I'm going to get to play Kiefer Sutherland's daughter on a TV show. And you get the pilot, and you don't really know, when you're not in the writer's room, you don't know the breakdown or where it's going to go, or if you're going to get picked up for more. And so I think I could understand I remember going back and reading it going, wow, there's a lot of things at play in this script. And without a visual context and without a creative mind like Steven and others that kind of went, this is what it's going to look like visually, you were left to your own devices at that point, because it didn't exist, So that first initial read of that script was very interesting and sort of confusing probably. And until you actually visually saw it, you went, oh, wow, okay, there's something here.
Yeah, it's definitely a format that I don't like. I just remember being captivated because I'd seen nothing like it before, and began my obsession with real-time cinema. Howard, how did you get involved with 24?
Am I on the right panel? Can you hear me?
Hey!
Yeah, you're here. You're in the right spot. Yeah.
I thought I was in the non-panelist link, so I didn't think I was on. I hope I didn't say anything.
You're in, mate. There we go. Yeah.
I got on. I had just, Steven said it was an underestimated pilot. I think no one, little engine that could. I was on the overestimated pilot that I just written for Fox called Ball and Chain, and it was very expensive, and it was on the schedule. And I was going to New York because it was on the schedule for the upfronts. And I got a call from Dana Walden, who was the head of Fox, who said, she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Oh, I'm going back to New York. I was actually buying a birthday present for my then 8-year-old son, who's now 28." And she said, "Well, you're not going to New York. Gail changed her mind and picked up this show 24. And she wants you on it wants you to meet Joel and Bob, the creators of the show, tomorrow morning. And she wants you to be on the show." So like the body wasn't even like in the ground, let alone warm. And I was, and I had, but that I went home and watched, Joel and Bob's and Steven's pilot. And I called her and I said, "You made the right choice." And then Joel and Bob, I met at Starbucks the next day, in Woodland Hills, not far from what would become our sound stages and our offices. And it really was kind of love at first sight. Those guys, I was kind of the platoon rat in a little bit, in that I'd been the guy who'd been at Fox since X-Files. And so, I think at some level they felt I was being foisted on them, or so it was a little uneasy, but like we kind of had a great instant rapport, and they were insanely generous. I mean, I was so lucky to come onto the show and get to be, if I didn't give birth to it, I got to be kind of the midwife or the adoptive co-parent.
So there's this hour pilot you watch, and the show's called 24. That means there's 23 more hours to cover. Did you have any concerns about that format or being able to keep that real time going?
That may be the understatement of, I mean, it was I think we all felt like we were on this high wire, and it was really from episode to episode and then from season to season. And, 24 episodes is just too much to look at all holistically. So I think it quickly became understood that if we had a very good base and it was an interesting foundation, we'd find our way across this impossible thing. But I do think that every year we felt, oh, wow, we survived that. There's no way we can do this again. And I mean, really, it was really like, when is it time to get out of this Ponzi scheme in a way? Like, how do we pull the way ahead? And the show kind of, it ebbed and it flowed for sure. And we had our better seasons and our worst seasons. But I think it's something we are all incredibly proud of having been part of. And I think, its impact, I think, not to overstate it, it was a lot first for a lot of things, the show, in terms of narratively, standalone episodes versus, we had to navigate that. The conventional wisdom at the time was, we're not doing this as a serialized show, of course, are we? And, Joel and Bob had the, wisdom to say no, of course, having every intention disregarding and ignoring them.
Which set the tone for binge watching for me, and all the great shows that have come after. All the return of serialized television to network TV was pretty amazing. Xander, recently saw you on Republic of Sarah. Great performance there. What did you enjoy about playing George Mason?
Well, beyond the obvious, meeting Sarah Clarke.
You just stole one of my future questions. Darn.
Getting our own little spin-offs, all in a row. It was all sort of a confluence of circumstances for me. I didn't even know which part I was being offered. I wasn't clear until I got there, and it's this guy. Oh, okay. And just sort of having a feeling of chemistry with Steven and everybody else, just sort of bringing my own little sort of ironic, dry, cynical sort of edge to the guy that had been written pretty straight. Because I just thought that would bring a texture of somebody that had been doing this for a long time, and a little humor never hurts here and there. It was just meant to be a guest star role, and I thought I was playing the guy that got killed, so it was going to be one and done, the O'Neill character. But yeah, and then they seemed to like what I did and wanted to write more for it, and were open to it, and it just became this great adventure. Sarah was in New York, so I drove across country to go get her, to pick her up to start the show. And
I think it's interesting because your character is the first interaction that Jack has where we get to see that he doesn't always play exactly by the rules. When you get drugged essentially, like within 2 minutes of appearing on screen, and sort of. So I think it's a real pivotal moment for the series to understand that this guy Jack is going to do whatever it takes to get the mission done,
and yet he somehow remained. Yeah. He somehow remained the moral superior while drinking. Because, and I think that's part of the reason why I felt like I had to make it even more of a cynical sort of lifer kind of guy that had broken rules a lot to help justify his having put me out.
Awesome. And Leslie, you're directing now TV series like SVU under your belt and Lost in Space. What can you say from like day one, season 1 of 24 that you learned that now directing for yourself and sitting in the director's chair, you've taken those lessons and carried them over?
Oh, now's a chance where I get to flatter Hopkins to his face, sort of to his computer face. What I remember from that experience was the involvement of the actors, for me personally anyway, attached me to the show in a way I hadn't really been attached emotionally to other stuff. So I really wanted to do a good job, and I really felt like Hopkins was driving that, and I could go to him directly with questions or what do you think about this, and could we try this? So now I try to keep that as I'm directing with the actors that I'm working with. And my embarrassing lesson that I learned from Hopkins was there was a scene, it was Elisha and I, it was some rapey scene.
Right.
And yeah, some rapey scene. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I said to Hopkins when I saw it, I was like, hey, I saw that. And, I sort of thought that, I was doing all this stuff and maybe that, you might want to swung it to me a few times, something completely obnoxious and offensive. And Hopkins said to me, it's not about you. And that's taking and pretty directly to some actors that I work with too, sort of have a sense that you're part of a bigger picture. And that's what that show felt like for me, that I was part of a company, a big picture, and as it turns out, a little bit of a phenomenon, a TV phenomenon. So those are some of the things. Other things I would say off the record somewhere else.
Fair enough. Sarah, how do people react when they bump into Nina on the streets?
Well, if I'm with my children, they're like, wait, what? They can't understand. Like, wait, she's got children. She's nice. But yeah, for the most part, people are very excited to sort of say that they love the show, and that a lot of people say that Nina was their hero. What's that about? But she did. They did love that, Nina was sort of her own person. And I think it was in the first 3 seasons, she was trying to survive. And it was only in later seasons that they colored her with all these other horrible qualities that I was like, what? Wait a minute, But in the first 3 seasons, I think she was really just trying to sort of keep up with the different things that were being thrown to her and making bad choices left and right.
When you're playing it, because almost everybody in 24 at some point has the like, are they the good guy or the bad guy? And you part of the fun is kind of guessing who's in on the job and who's not. Are you preparing that episode to episode, or do you know your arc season? Like, do you know the whole over arc of your character? Yeah. That's a group question and anybody can answer. Yeah.
Well, I think we can all say that first season in particular, I mean, they were like 13 episodes. We don't know, I mean, they did figure it out, and you guys can back me up on this, but that once they figured out, wow, we're going to get to do the whole 24, then it really became secretive about like, okay, so when do they tell actors what? And I think,
Well, I'll tell you the answer is right away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
What'd you say?
I mean, yeah.
Right away. Yeah.
I mean, right. Yeah. Right. I mean, like because, and it's interesting just from a creative point of view. And I think Leslie, said it best, that this really was this strange, massive novel really. And, the facts were, oh, Jack had this affair with Nina, and that was that. And then, but now, and there's this guy, David Palmer. We didn't know how all those things were going to cinch together. And yet our unconscious kind of knew. We had the lucky foundation of Jack had an emotional moment with this woman. So let's now let her, there's a great saying, there's no betrayal without love. And so you were the first mole, the first great mole. There was a little one, at CTU originally, but you were this foundational, bête noire. What's the right word? Well, I guess betrayer, a traitor. And who better than the person with whom Jack had this affair?
Right. But they didn't let me know till 2 to the end. So that was like
Well, we
a
didn't know,
thing.
but honestly, we didn't know till very, very close. I mean, it was very like, well, who is it? What's going on? And then we said, it's her. Who else could it
Yeah.
be?
Well, and it made for a very exciting, every time you got a script, you were kind of like, what's going to happen now? And it definitely helped fuel the atmosphere of, you know, what it was to be a spy, because you honestly had to keep secrets. You had to keep your cards close to your chest. But by the second and third season, at least for my character, I know that we had a sort of loose understanding of like, okay, so this is what it is. And then by the third season, there was a whole different narrative of, okay, this is what it is. So it was something with each season, right? For at least
Well, but
the ones
once,
that came back.
but once we opened that door, it suggested, oh, this, you know, because we had to sort of build the backstory we had to sort of build the front window first and then see what doors that led to. But, you know, again, I would only say our unconscious and this group think and the impossible schedule of inventing kind of on demand.
Very exciting.
I think too that people don't realize how skillful the plotting and writing was in the first year, because I remember halfway through the first season, really a lot of the ideas had already been done. So Leslie had to lose her memory for an hour, I think, and we had to, which gave us pause to try and figure out the rest of the stuff. And you know, it's just a lot of really skillful people, you know, seeing what we had to work with, and in terms of, you know, production stuff, but also to keep on creating the stories. The first season was a roller coaster. I mean, I wasn't able to stay after the first season, but I assume the rest weren't quite as bonkers as the first one in terms of that.
Yeah, maybe more so.
And Daniel's joined us. Daniel, question for you. You know, we like the character of Rick somehow. Like we really shouldn't. Like how do you go about approaching that where you can be the likable bad guy?
Well, maybe it helps that I didn't know what I was completely or what was going to happen at all. So, yeah, I don't know. Anytime I've been hired, it's either the asshole who turns out to be a pretty good guy, or the really good guy who turns out to be a little bit of an asshole. So I'm like bread and butter.
You've got to type. This is a fan question for the group, and this can just be kind of popcorn style. Whoever's got the answer first. What is your single best memory of working on season 1 of 24? No memories. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about
Too many.
before we got on the panel was that, and I think this has a lot to do with Stephen, because we were doing really intense stuff, like really intense content and really crazy, like, you know, especially for my character being so young, like it was like pretty heavy, the stuff that I was going through, but on set was so much fun. And Stephen actually did this thing where I apologize for forgetting the name, but there was a stuffed animal, a stuffed dog. And I just remember Stephen having this stuffed dog. Someone saying Mr. Floppy, is that possible?
Mr. Floppy.
Oh my God, Mr. Floppy. Okay, so it was this yellow little, you know, wiener dog, and Stephen would always find a way to hide it or sneak it in shots and behind the camera, you know, and it was just kind of, I remember it so vividly because in all the craziness and all the insanity of it all, we were laughing, and here was this like major director going, we need to make sure Mr. Floppy and it was like incredible. And I have such good memories of having fun too, you know, even with the intensity of it all, just laughing a lot and just having a really, really good time. And it was so intense, and we were all working together for so many hours, and you know, just that format, that 1 hour drama is so intense. So you're kind of living in this fishbowl with each other. And for me anyway, I felt like nothing else really existed except going home and sleeping and coming back and seeing everyone again. So it was this amazing thing that we at least had such a good time, you know, behind the scenes while we were doing all this crazy, crazy stuff.
Yeah, it definitely felt like a family, for sure.
Stephen, should we go back and look at your earlier work and look for Mr. Floppy in Freddy Krueger's basement, or, you know, on the Predator spaceship or something? Is this
I'm sorry, it's Guy Fawkes night here tonight, so there's fireworks and people being burned alive and stuff, so it's kind of noisy. But we found Mr. Floppy in Kim's bedroom in the first shot of the first episode we ever did, and it was this bizarre yellow animal, and then after that we would put a shadow and project it on the side of a skyscraper, or it'd be out of focus behind an arch villain's head. And actually since then, every film I've done, which is quite a lot, I've had a little creature which is in every shot. It started off a tradition for me, but he was quite big, wasn't he? He was quite hard to hide, but yeah.
He was prominent.
This is how you direct. You get a funny stuffed animal and you put it in every shot, and that's how it works. You know, that's what Fellini did. That's what all the great directors do. So there you go.
Anyone else for best memories of season 1?
I can tell you that I had a moment with, well, actually parties at Hopkins' house. Those are good memories for me. But I had a moment with Kiefer on the pilot, and I probably have told this story before, where, you know, he's Canadian, Leisha's Canadian, Mia's Canadian. We're a bunch of us were sort of there. And I'd been at a point in my life where I just wanted to hang up the cleats, right? I didn't want to keep acting. And I just had a small movie I was trying to direct. It fell apart and I was kicking the dirt and bleh. And then I got this job. And I loved it so much. But on the pilot, I remember, I'm just going to say it, having a cigarette out back with Kiefer and him asking me how I was doing. And I said, I feel so grateful. And he said, me too. And this moment of the two of us, this is before everything blew up and stuff, of just being there, like, I don't know, just linked in a way, or together in a way. It really was a special time for me, that whole experience.
I remember on day 2 of the pilot shoot, I was shooting in the morning. Leslie and Sarah and I had to get a Fox at lunchtime to do a final reading in front of the Fox people. Yeah. And then we came back at the end of lunchtime, and what Sarah was wearing, she had to go into a scene with. So her own clothes had to be made many times for the rest of the season, because we had to go straight into a scene, and it was pretty spontaneous that way, I think.
Oh my God, completely. And we kind of were like, oh, right, it's one day. Oh God, yeah, we're gonna have to keep wearing this. Like, we were sort of cognizing this the whole time. But yeah, that was such a funny thing, because I remember riding in the car with Joel to set, like after the audition, because they're like, and now you need to go shoot your first scene. And I was like, oh, really? But I got to call someone about my cat in LA. I mean, in New York, because I come up for the read, and you think, oh, you know, if we get it, you know, no, we're going right now. And then I went over, right? And remember, Stephen, too, they kept trying to put me in other clothes, and you're like, I like what she had on. I just like that. Let's just use that. So you're like, okay.
I didn't think, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're talking about favorite moments. Are you talking about in the pilot or the whole first season?
The whole first season, day 1.
The whole first season. You know, Xander and I thought we were trying to be our own sort of spies and keep it from the rest of everybody that we were dating. And so we'd be kind of like going off, and people would be kind of maybe thinking, oh, maybe they're a couple, but then we wouldn't talk about it, and we'd, like, you know, shoot on different days. Every once in a while we'd have a scene. But then we got engaged, and what was really great was Robert Rosser, right?
No,
Richard Rosser.
Our
like
first AD.
Our first AD, who was such a, you know, we had a few of them, and they all were just sort of like the parents of us, to keep us in, like, on schedule and everything. I told him, I was like, Xander and I, we have an announcement. And he's like, you do? And I told him, I was like, I'd love to make an announcement tomorrow. And he's like, okay, whatever. And so I didn't know this, but he already sort of suspected it, and they got a cake. So when we made our announcement to say that we were engaged, they then brought out this huge cake. So it was a really beautiful
and champagne.
thing.
I don't know if we brought the champagne or cake, but he brought the other. And everybody was expecting it to be the announcement of the show's been picked up. So they're a little like, oh, you're getting, oh.
But not only that, I was so nervous to talk about it that I was like, I'm marrying George. And everyone was like, What?
Darling, my name is Xander. Go ahead.
Talk about being in your own world. I was just so like,
By the way, you were terrible spies. Everyone knew. So
You know what? The funniest story is Carlos, when we were shooting the pilot and we were all hanging out. No, after we'd done the pilot, we'd come back for the first episode.
right.
Carlos said, so what did you do over the summer? And I said, well, I went to Portugal and I drove cross country. And he's, oh my God, you've got to talk to Sarah. She went to Portugal and she drove cross country too.
Yeah, because we looked at right after the pilot.
Rodney, question for you. How did you go about designing the look of the show? Oh, I think you're muted.
Rodney,
Where's Rodney? I want to see Rodney.
press stop video and unmute.
Hi.
There you go.
Hey. I got coerced. I was on a Fox show and they took me to meet Steven. And at the time, Fox was playing with digital. And so I told Steven that, and he said, over my dead body will we shoot on anything else but film on this show. And so that put that to rest. And then I was thrilled to find that, coming from a feature background, he was quite happy to block in the most audacious ways and said to us right away, this is a 5-page scene. We will start at the beginning and we will continue shooting right throughout the whole thing. And both cameras are handheld and I never want to see the cameras, but you're going to cover the action in its fullest until we call cut at the end of the scene. And that had never been done to me before, but I had a whole background of documentary work. So I resolved to say, okay, so how do we light this and not see any of our lighting in these vast spaces or down this corridor and through this door? And I had the best operators, both A and B, Guy and Jay, who took to it in a wonderful sense of, we can do this. We will physically become dance partners with the cast. And I think that was the secret to it, that really once action was called, we were able to follow performance in a very fluid way that took you and involved you in a very embracing way that hadn't really been done that much on film before, certainly not in television, because we broke all the rules. We crossed the line all the time, and we worked out how that we would physically have the wide lens cross over somebody's shoulder so that we could reset the eye line, and we go back the other way. And then the B camera was on a very long lens, 420 most of the time, and they were cropping very tight. And my whole job was to keep Guy's matte box from being in the frame, and then of course to follow the action. And Steven immediately said, okay, we can do 180s on this set. So we're walking backwards with Kiefer pushing us through a door, and we'll whip pan to the other side of the room and we'll find his protagonist. And then we'll bring them together in a 2-shot and an over, and both cameras were dancing around us the whole time. So in a nutshell, it was the dance quality, I think, of coverage that really allowed us to tell the story the way it was coming out.
And I was going to say, as Guy's back got worse, I mean, it was amazing that Guy and Jay, how they really were such secret weapons. And I'm happy, Rodney, that you mentioned that, because they found the moments and were there for those moments. And it was, and in subsequent seasons, it became increasingly hard to communicate what was their intuition and their understanding of how this real-time story worked.
There was a secret language between Guy and Kiefer, who would telegraph his moves in a way that allowed Guy to get his haunches together and sit up from his butt dolly at the appropriate moment just before Kiefer would make his move. And they would communicate silently during the scene on timing. And because dialogue was coming out of Kiefer so fast, it was such a rapid amount of flicking the frame from left to right and into a close-up and back again. It's absolutely staggeringly important that Guy's contribution was there. And sadly, eventually, because everybody wanted us to shoot the 16-minute takes because we were on film, he put up 90-pound of camera on his shoulder and squished his back and suffered a lot. We had to build him an upside-down rack that he would hang in at lunch to sort of survive.
Was it always like, shooting the 2 cameras and using the split screen, was it always intentional that you would sometimes be covering, a moment from both cameras in the split screen, or was that just an editorial decision where you're already using split screen and went, oh, every once in a while we can also show two perspectives of the same exact moment?
It was
I don't
very
know that.
planned. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Stephen.
No, I mean, it was planned to death because instead of shooting one page of normal script, we just had to shoot maybe 4 different points of view of the same page. You know, I was a big fan of William Friedkin and talked to him a lot about lots of things. And in French Connection, he used to block the scenes, not show the operators the scene, light it, and then bring the only operators in when they shot. And it gave you this kind of faux documentary style because they would be guessing what was happening. And there were plenty of times, actually, Rodney, if you remember, we would keep the operators out of the scene and only launch them in so they'd shoot the rehearsal. And you get this immediacy, you know, you get this veneer of sincerity and the veneer of truth, you know, on something which is, let's face it, quite hyperbolically untrue. So it just sort of grounded it, I think. And also it was, you know, shot to look a little bit grainy deliberately, you know, and it suited the time we had to shoot. We didn't have much time to shoot these episodes. So the idea of going this way started off in some ways because we didn't have much money or time to start with in the first season anyway. And then it became, you know, it gave you a sense of that this is really happening on top of everything else. And in the sound mix, we used to sometimes make it sound deliberately bad, poor, like the microphone wasn't there. So it felt, you know, it felt like this was happening in real time. It felt like you're watching it as it went along. You know, that was the idea anyway. I think it worked.
We were at the point technically where we were able to shoot on the streets in the valley under sodium light from a helicopter, from a handheld camera in a helicopter, from a car that was pursuing the other car with people hiding. And the helicopter never saw any of the cameras, but it was chasing the car, and you'd go into an alley and then there'd be a third or a fourth camera waiting. And we'd just continue this on. And some of these events they'd be on a highway, a freeway, they'd get off, and it was magic the way we were able to cover it. I remember once when we did that jet.
It was like an enormous sitcom, you know, with all these different characters.
Rewatching season 1 ahead of this, it was interesting because I lived in North Hollywood for several years, but I'd seen the show, then moved to LA, then rewatching, I was like, oh, I know where all of these places are. Yeah. Like I know where all these spots in the valley are. So for Leslie and for Elisha, how and Kiefer who's not here, but how do 3 Canadians make the perfect all-American family? Strange casting, right? Strange casting.
I told you, I didn't even think I was going to get it. So I had no clue that there was so many Canadian connections until we got on set. But then I realized, you know, with La Femme Nikita and their experience in Canada, Joel and you know, it just, maybe that's what kind of helped me out at the end of the day. You know, maybe that's what kind of made the difference. And they thought, oh, this is, you know, another Canadian kid. She'll fit great with Leslie and Kiefer, and they'll all have stuff to talk about. You know, I don't know. So I think maybe it was a benefit. But it definitely felt very comforting because, again, I was very new, very young, 18. And to have them as sort of my, you know, TV parents and to have them understand sort of how I was, you know, brought up and where, and it made it so great. So, but yeah, I don't know how we were playing this American Family. That's crazy.
I don't either. I mean, probably Hopkins or Joel and Bob could speak to that more about what made that decision for them, but it all made sense to me on the day, but I don't know how did they let us in?
Maybe it's just the chemistry, you know, maybe just being from Canada, the chemistry worked and it just fit. I mean,
but you weren't all saying A and oot and things, were you? I mean, you could have been, it sounded American to me, but what do I know?
Yeah.
This is a question for everybody again. So answer it as you think of the answer. What was the moment that you knew that like 24 was a hit, that this was a big deal?
You know, I'll quickly step in because I thought it was so unlikely, like Stephen said, that it would get picked up because ordinarily in syndication, the show has to be able to play out of order. And this one just couldn't. but there was both the tragedy of 9/11 and the strange synergy of the sort of zeitgeist moment of how close our show was to events that were happening in the world all of a sudden. Unlike when we read and shot the pilot, as soon as we started shooting the show, it was happening. And that I think Howard can speak to how much the writers had to think on their feet to avoid things being too similar and too disturbing, upsetting for people, but yet take a kind of creative advantage of the sudden focus of attention everybody had on terrorism and in general. And there was, to me, something very exciting about, Stephen and Kiefer, the other film backgrounds. I've been sort of a film snob and hadn't really wanted to be on a series. And there was something suddenly so cinematic and so exciting about taking a script that had been written very quickly and being given the freedom to work with it. And that time that might have been spent just setting up cameras and lighting ordinarily, Stephen allowed and created an atmosphere in which we could work and chew on and rework the dialogue so that it flowed out in a way that felt adrenalized and natural. And all of that just made it so like a great film experience. And it just felt like something's got to come out of this.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah, I think 9/11 was incredibly important, because accidentally we all created Homeland Security before it existed, with the CT and stuff in it. And I remember we were shooting in LA when 9/11 happened, and we stopped and we didn't know what to do about it. And the show got put back, right? It got put back till now, because it was supposed to come out in September, I think. But everyone was talking about what to do, and I wasn't sure what to do. I thought, God, it feels like we shouldn't put this out. This is, but Fox was saying, people, I think, will want to confront this, and I wasn't sure if they were being
I don't think they had anything else to put on. I think I think they were seriously considering pulling it entirely.
Yeah, they were. I think we all were, right? We didn't know what to do, did we? We were all talking about it, what the avenue it should take, whether you should change it or this and that. But I think in the end, it was right to put it on, probably. I think, because obviously it was right until it was sort of wrong. I mean, it was not wrong, but I mean, 9/11 really was. I mean, as Xander and as Stephen just mentioned, it really was this. We were all in shock. The world, the actors, the writers, the editors. I think all of us were creators, and then we had given birth to this hero, who, wow, what if he'd actually been there before this happened? And and the bureaucrats, like the indifferent or by turns corrupt bureaucrats, like which Xander kind of became the template for that. That we're every bit as part of the problem as the bad guys, as the as the terrorists themselves. And so I think Jack became kind of this, and the show became this cathartic experience for the first couple of years post 9/11. But then when Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo happened, and suddenly the idea of coercive interrogation and torture entered the national stage, we also then became the crucible and the touchstone for a darker idea. And so, but we were in this show, and we had we had the conundrum of actually telling the story and evolving with the world as it was changing in the context of this so-called war on terror. So, and there was a wonderful thing, I think, of Dennis's character, the president, and Penelope too. They were a really driving force of this show. I think the idea of a black president was absurd at the time, and there was pushback to it, but I remember we all pushed for it, and it obviously paid off. He's a huge character. But I think Penny was a fantastic character. His wife, the Lady Macbeth of the series, she was extraordinary, because I think people loved her, because I think a lot of times, as we all know, until 20 years ago, black characters were not necessarily given a lot of depth, or they played sort of stereotypes. But I think African Americans loved Penny because she was so naughty and mischievous and dark, and he was so smart, but he wasn't boring, and I think that really elevated the show enormously. It was a great idea. I'm so glad it managed to get in like that.
Well, I would like to say thank you for pushing back. Absolutely.
I mean, everyone pushed back. No, it's just a brilliant idea. years later, recently, 5 years ago, I did a movie called Race, and I spent the day, luckily for me, with President Obama, and he brought this up. You know, he loved 24 the first year. You know, he thought it was he thought it was hilarious, and he referenced it a lot when we chatted.
So in terms of that, what was the discussion? You know, do we reshoot the opening parts of the pilot and have a different method of getting the ID and the photographer, or was it just everybody stuck to their guns and said, if we delay the release a little bit, we think the world will, you know, still appreciate and understand?
It was a taste. Well, I think it was the delay was one piece, and then also just trimming, edit. You're just looking for the more objectionable shots. And
yeah.
those.
I think we literally cut out the shot of the plane exploding, didn't we?
Yeah.
There was a big visual effects shot, and it was just too recent and too horrific to keep that kind of stuff.
So in terms of the show's success, when it became a thing, was it right after the pilot, like the episode 1 airs, or when did it catch on that you realized it had become this cultural phenomenon?
Well, it really wasn't. I think the first season, the ratings, believe it or not, I mean, they weren't out of the box great. I mean, people, it was almost it did well. Critically, it was appreciated, but it wasn't really till the subsequent year that I think it became the global phenomenon.
I gotta say that around the rest of the world, apart from America, it was absolutely huge. In Britain, in France, a lot of countries that's a big part of why they picked it up, because it did so well in terms of farm. But what's and also the invention of the box set too, right?
I was just going to say that 24 was the first show that really kind of technology really was on our side. I mean, TiVo had just gotten market share, so people were able to DVR the show and catch up. At the same time, as Steven said, the DVD market was exploding. I mean, and so people could buy those whole sets. And then I think it was a great dance. Again, I think this is obviously a very actor-heavy panel at the moment, but there's a whole side story, there's a whole, editors, and there were writers, and that's, I'm the only one on the screen who was in that world, but there were these two parallel universes happening. And there was also a whole marketing team at Fox that really made famously one good decision after the other in terms of when to release the box set, how to do this, and it was just a happy accident or a confluence of accidents. The best one being Xander and Sarah, but there were many great things that came out of this.
And the ways that
Sorry,
go ahead.
But you think also the growing use of the internet was also right concurrent with it,
and cell phones.
People being able to talk about the show on a global, network was kind of the other thing, because people the buzz would grow, and then it was all about like, oh my God, I got to know what's happening. No, don't tell me. And I think that was something that was, we look at it as like, oh yeah, that's just around, but that was not really thought about, like talking about it in chat rooms.
Right.
I was always a movie fan. I didn't watch much television, but Ryan, who organized this convention, lent me that DVD and said, you got to watch this. You're going to love it. And that was it. Like I said at the beginning, I had to call in sick the next day because I started at, I don't know, like 4 p.m, and I just stayed awake and watched the entire season. I was addicted. So I think you guys really set the beginning of the binge watch in a way, and it's that sort of DVD success where a TV show could live outside of just conventional airing at a certain time on a certain network. It has to be some of the inspiration that brought the now streaming media that we all know so well, and the binge watch of just dropping entire series at once. Because 24 is one of the most exhilarating things where every episode ended and you're like, I should go to bed, but I can't. I have to know what happens next.
It was so effective that we used to go in our neighborhood up in Beechwood Canyon to friends who had a bigger screen and watch with them and a group of people. And we had already shot the episode of what was to follow. But when the show boom, ended, we were like, oh, we want to see what happens next. It was so, it worked on us too. It's just,
it had that perfect water cooler, talk about it at work the next day, because we would have watch parties. And that's sometimes the fun of the week to week airing, is the speculation and discussion of what do you think is going to happen and what's going to happen next. Some of that I think gets lost in the binge watch thing where you plow through it and almost don't remember what you just watched. you know, the week to week thing and having those cliffhangers. How much thought went into where to end every episode and how to end it on those perfect cliffhangers that you knew was going to pull people back in next week?
A lot of thought. I mean, truly, and sometimes, I mean, again, it was almost a rhythmic thing, and it's a lot less obvious than you might imagine. Which is, you know, what is that? Yes, there were some of these wonderful reveals, but some of them were deep emotional ones. I mean, they'd have different characters and different colors, and some of them were sort of, I would say, this was like an inadvertently syncopated show. There were quiet ones. I mean, we slowed down to speed up. We caught up. I mean, not everything could be a gem. Sometimes you just had to keep Monday from bumping into Tuesday. And the stitch work was challenging, but it was always something that made you lean in a way and made you want more.
Also, I think we used to dare to end right in the middle of something.
Right.
You know, we used to stop right in the middle of a scene, like bring just a hammer down, like poof, and you go, what? You can't stop there. You know, and as opposed to making a big, and here's the end. Rather than that, which I think was very cool. You know, it was very cool that it would just leave it suspended without an ending sometimes, and so you just, you know, obnoxiously had to watch the beginning of the next one,
which was like a drug-like addiction for people, and it tied into this whole first box set binge watching thing. And I can remember people Sarah and I would be at the airport going somewhere, and people had just come out of like a week of watching, and then they would see us and they would freak out. But they looked like, you know, crackheads, people that have been watching the show. It's crazy.
So what is the standout moment in the story of the series? Like what is the proudest accomplishment in the storytelling of day one of 24 that you will claim proudly? Because I feel like
I always thought the ending was pretty daring. The final scene, which we all know was quite traumatic to shoot, but I mean that was a very, very unusual for TV, that's for sure, and it really was emotional.
One of the main characters, for sure.
Yeah,
and for Leslie too, I think it was quite.
Traumatic for all of us.
Yeah, and it was, but again, I think Leslie, you know, in the hindsight of 20 years, it was a story that was like so evident to us. And if you really, you know, you really look at the architecture of the show, when it ebbs and flows, Jack has this thing that he's trying to save. Again, it was this inevitable thing that was like, again, it bucked conventional wisdom, but it would have demanded a kind of reset that would have been a stasis for the show. It really was a less promising place to start, where he saves the world but loses his family. And again, just if you look at it architecturally, it was the only way it could end. But because it was so, you know, again, it's like, how can you do that? So it took, you know, a couple of drafts of trying to say, let's make it work with this. And we knew that we would be tying our hands for any subsequent seasons.
Ryan, how are we for time? We got to be getting down to it, right?
I just want to say one thing. I want to mention the fan phone, if I could.
Oh, please.
Sterling, a phone rang in his pocket. It was a prop phone, and we had previously shot a big close-up of it, and nobody bothered to change the number. So it rang. Sterling, take it up. Somebody called
you. Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's so good.
Sterling.
My mind's going crazy watching everybody come pop up. No, the fan phone was actually Randy's cell phone. We needed a phone in the scene. Randy just takes his old Nextel, and I put it in the shot, and it was supposed to ring like on a counter. We didn't know until the show aired, because all of a sudden Randy is getting call after call after call, like literally nonstop.
Oh my God.
And he was a Sprint. I think it was Sprint, I believe, was the carrier. We had to actually.
It was. I think it was Nextel. Dick Kiker came in the following day after the episode aired, and he was like, "This phone has been ringing all night."
That's amazing. Oh
give it to me, because we get John and I, when we go on scouts, it's so boring sitting in the van. I said, give it to me, I'll just answer calls. And that's
incredible.
Amazing.
It's pretty epic happenstance, you know.
I think the first night that episode aired, it was a Nextel phone, and it had 60,000 calls.
Yep.
I have a question for Stephen. And I mean, this panel's been amazing. It's so good to see you all together again. It's just beyond what I could have dreamed it would become. Stephen, was directing Kiefer in The Fugitive different than directing him on 24?
Yeah, I knew Kiefer before 24, and I was one of the people who helped to get him involved in it because he wasn't really sure if he wanted to do TV at that time.
Right.
And we were buddies. We've been buddies since before 24. And so, yeah, Fugitive was just a bizarre experiment. We had to shoot this, I don't know however long it was, thing in a certain amount of days. And I'm not sure if it turned out very successfully, but you know, it was great to work with him 20 years later, you know, and I've seen him over the years, and I think now he's more of a rock star already than an actor now. He was playing music all over the place. So we go back a long way, and he's just a good, really good bloke, you know, and he's obviously very smart filmmaker. And most great actors are smart filmmakers, I think. And he, you know, he knew the camera so well. He knew how to play a real leading man without being boring. You know, sometimes playing a leading man is not the exciting thing to do. It's better to play the bad guys or the weirdos or whatever. But, you know, he obviously really drove it. I don't think any of this would have been successful without him. We could have all written clever things and like to have directed clever things, but I think he inhabited that character and just pushed it, you know, wildly through. I've got to say, it is lovely to see Joseph and Rodney and Howard again. I haven't seen you guys for a while, but
so nice.
You guys don't get together every weekend?
Yeah, there's Mr. Floppy.
I put the background up.
Oh, that's Mr. Floppy.
I still have Mr. Floppy. I still have Mr. Floppy, and I also have the Floppy family that the makeup crew knitted.
What? Oh my God, amazing.
Yeah. Well, as we move from day one, the next is going to be CTU. Are there any parting messages or thoughts from our day one group?
So many, right? I think the way you start.
I would say thank you for having me. Here we are 20 years later, but it literally changed my life.
Yeah, definitely.
And also,
I mean,
thank you.
I'm delighted to see all of you. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it changed all our lives, but I think it allowed TV to change a bit too. I think, you know, I feel nowadays, you know, most of the best writing is still in TV rather than English-speaking cinema. You know, and it's I think it allowed TV to become really sophisticated. You know, because it was even though it was an adventure and all that kind of stuff, the characters were so grounded and gritty and cool. You know, it was it really, you know, it was a joy for me. It's helped me a lot in my life. I know that.
Well, Gavin and I want to thank all of you for being part of day one and just sharing your stories and experiences. I do especially want to thank Leslie because she was the first person that said she would talk to me on the podcast, and that's one of 44. But she didn't know me from anything and said, "Yeah, I'll come talk to you about 24," and it just kind of blew up from there. But she took a chance, and we're here today. So.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
What are you saying, Leslie? Is we'll talk to anyone. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Anyone will join. Leslie.
Even other Canadians. Even other Canadians.
There was that.
Honestly,
right.
this has been an honor as a guy making real-time split-screen movies currently. You know, like it all goes back to my love of 24 and where it started. So thank you so much for having me, Ryan, and to everybody. Like, wonderful to chat, and congratulations on such a legacy of a series. And you know, I think you're ready for day two, Ryan.
Yes,
right.
Thank you, Ryan. It's so fun to get to see everybody.
Yes,
Thank you for bringing us all together.
Absolutely, my thrill. Okay, we'll run some video, and then we'll switch panels, and we'll get right back in.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.